All right, let's enter the multiverse and ask, what if the Spurs selected Tyrese Haliburton instead of Devin Vassell?
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to Locked On Spurs. We're in the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Kens 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you back. And yeah, happy hump day, everybody. Hope you're all getting through your workday. We thank you for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Kens 5 Plus app, YouTube. Go subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast. You want to do that ASAP. Leave a comment where you're at the Locked On Spurs YouTube page. We might read it in a future episode, and kind of helps us keep the topics going here throughout the long off season for your Silver and Black. So what are we talking about today? You can see in your screen right now if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're not, you're listening to the show, we're going to be entering the multiverse. As y'all know, I'm a big nerd, right? I mean, I think all of San Antonio knows that. And the whole multiverse thing in the comics, right? We're going to enter that world right now and ask, what if the Spurs had selected Tyrese Haliburton instead of Devin Vassell in the 2020 draft, excuse me. Now, remember, Vassell was selected number 11 overall, I believe, in that draft, but Haliburton was on the board. He went immediately afterwards. So how much could have been for your Silver and Black, for the league? So much more. Would Wemby be in Spurs colors? Yeah, let's talk about that and more. But because frankly, first of all, it wasn't my idea. You know, I'm getting kind of stumped with some ideas as this offseason continues. So I had to reach out to my good friend Casey Vieira, and he's like, I want to talk about this. He was basically like this, just grinning, just like, yeah, let's get Spurs fans fired up about Brian Wright. You know what? I'm not going to go there. Let's go to bring him on. He is Casey Vieira, my good friend. Follow him on X at Casey_Vieira. He's going like this right now. Like, yes, let's get Spurs fans riled up about a whiff that Brian Wright may have done.
To be fair, I will say this. To be fair, I left them with a pretty reasonable, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In said multiverse, if it went the way it did, I thought that I left them with a pretty good starting place.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into that and so much more. And by the way, we're also going to have a take from a friend of the show, Rudy Campos, later on this show. He gave his 2 cents on what could happen. He wanted to join for this episode, but he just couldn't. But he definitely wanted to get his opinion on the whole thing. Because I don't know if you ever watched his show, Casey, but he and his crew, they love going down the rabbit hole. Like, what if the Malice in the Palace didn't happen? Does Reggie get his first ring with the Pacers? So, I mean, that's something to think about. The Malice in the Palace didn't happen. Would they've gotten a ring? I think they would have.
Well, I mean,
that Pacers team was tough, man. They were just rugged and tough.
Losing our test.
Yeah,
that's a major. That's major. Yeah, that's our test in his prime.
Yeah,
and
he had Reggie still. I think Reggie maybe was coming off his prime already on the decline.
Yeah, well, that was if I'm not mistaken, I think that was Reggie's last season.
Right. Well, even then, his last season, that squad was stacked. It was Artest, Reggie. I mean, maybe showing himself. Jermaine O'Neal, Steven Jackson, who was still playing pretty well. So they had some horses there. But anyway, we're going to enter the Spurs multiverse and ask, what if in 2020 the Spurs selected Haliburton over Vassell? And we're bringing him up because, Haliburton and the Pacers are in the NBA Finals starting tomorrow. And, of course, we're watching the game. We're watching how much Haliburton is playing. You start scratching your head and saying, what if Brian Wright had picked him? What if that war room in San Antonio said, nah, let's go with Haliburton instead of Vassell? So we're going to do that. But I guess we should say no shot at Vassell. This is nothing against him. This is just going a different course in Spurs history. So let's start off with the biggest ripple effect. By the way, again, this is Casey's idea, so I'm pretty sure he's chomping at the bit. So
all messages.
Yeah, exactly. To me. Exactly. Yeah. The first thing I gotta say is the Spurs would have had one incredible backcourt. I think it would have been really solid with Haliburton, a young Haliburton. I think maybe a Dejounte Murray, and was Derrick White on the roster already?
Derrick White was on the roster. He was.
Yeah, that would have been, maybe the Spurs would have been ahead of the curve with really positionless basketball. 3 guards lineup out there. I mean, talk about the ball handling, talk about the scoring. talk about just the facilitating, because I think Haliburton was like 7.7 assists per game in his rookie season. You would have not just one, not just two, but three primary ball handlers. But if we're focusing on Haliburton, I think he would have meshed well with LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan. I think that team would have been pretty good. Casey, your thoughts?
Yeah, that team was playing well. This was the 72, that was 2020, 2021. So that was the 72 game season, the first mid-season after COVID. And that team at one point was 6 games over 500 midway through the season. They were a playoff team. Ultimately, they hit a bump in the road. They had a bunch of games wiped out due to COVID. They had Derrick White catch COVID, and he was never the same for the remainder of that season. I mean, it pretty much wiped. It looked like he forgot how to shoot the basketball. Yeah. It was terrible, and really just downplayed Derrick White's stock, which ultimately proved to be the wrong decision, and the right one for the Celtics, at least. You know, getting him cents on the dollar. But you're looking at a team at that point, like you said, Haliburton probably doesn't start knowing the Spurs way. Knowing how they operate with these young draft picks. And you saw it with Devin Vassell that year. He only played 17 minutes a night. But you have a very good foundation and backcourt going forward between him, between Dejounte, and whatever works, whatever happens with Derrick White. You know, that team ultimately did go to the play-in. They lost in the first round, finished 6 games under 500. But then you look what came the following season was Dejounte's all-star campaign.
Right,
what does that look like now?
Probably doesn't
have 2 essentially all-stars in the backcourt.
Yeah.
That changes things entirely for the Spurs on top of that. So should Haliburton have ended up there, what does the next year look like? And then if you really want to expand that following draft, the 21 draft, let's operate under the assumption that 21 draft, the Spurs pick somewhere close to that 12 to 15 mark. They in the real time, in reality, that number 12 pick in 21 was Josh Primo. They're not selecting Josh Primo if they have a backcourt developed there. Who goes 4 picks later? Alperen Sengun goes.
Ooh.
So you're looking at a foundational core of Haliburton, of Dejounte, Alperen Sengun. It means no Wemby because they're not going to be bad enough. They're not punting those 2 Seads in the middle. But if your core consists of Haliburton and Sengun, and in some capacity Dejounte, you get the feeling they would have moved him anyway. So we'll just say Haliburton and Sengun. That's a pretty good baseline to start.
That really is.
That's a pretty good baseline to start. So while the narrative, when we talk about it out loud, when we think about it, is like, oh, they wouldn't have gotten Wemby. Well, they would have had a pretty good alternative if they played out very similar to the way they did.
Yeah, I think Haliburton becomes your cornerstone. He is the guy you build around moving forward, right? He is that. And maybe, the Spurs rebuild, quote unquote, is shorter. But the only thing I worry about is with that team, let's just say, a Sengun, a Murray, a White, a Haliburton, do they become a mediocre team? Are they just that middling team still? That's where I kind of pause, because I would feel they would have had to make a move to bring in maybe just more help. Sengun, I just feel, because if you figure then that's a crowded backcourt, Murray likely gets moved regardless. Do you move Derrick White? Is that your Castle, possibly Harper tandem we might see in a few months? In the past, White, Haliburton, or do they keep Murray and Haliburton?
Right.
Yeah. What do you think?
You operate under the assumption, I think, that one of Dejounte or Derrick White
they're moved. Yeah.
And what was forever the sentiment towards the back end of their time here was that they were too similar to the same, too much the same player. Dejounte was better at the time. Derrick White was sent to Boston on cents on the dollar. So you operate under the assumption that one of those 2 guys is moved. I think, say, on the Dejounte side of things, and they put all the eggs in the Derrick White basket, the question that arises, does Derrick White become the player that he is now that he's
Uh,
honestly, now that I say that, he might be the in some respects the second best player on Boston, but built around the foundation that he can be the number 3 option behind Tatum and Brown. Does he turn into that player here in San Antonio?
I think he still does. I think he still does.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, he just has it in him. He has it. He is that rock.
So you would not be fazed by that struggle that he had in that 21 from 2020 to 2022 after COVID.
No, I wouldn't be okay. I would still push forward him. But here's the other thing too. When I look at this what if world, and let's just say Haliburton is in Spurs colors here. I got to hear right here. I think if you don't have Vassell, then you're kind of lacking that 3-and-D wing. You don't have that, and I think that will become a priority for the Spurs to go look for. Yes, Haliburton's offensive impact is huge. I think the Spurs would be fine, but it's because DeRozan. I don't know if
he left. He left that summer anyways.
Yeah. So DeRozan leaves, and you're still lacking a wing. So in this world that you created for us, you have Haliburton, Sengun, and Murray, at least for that moment. So that's where I start thinking they're still an incomplete team. You don't have a wing, and that's where I think the Spurs go look at. Perhaps they address it in the draft. I mean, what about that ripple effect?
No, for sure. And you wonder what part of Keldon Johnson at that point. Well, we've seen so many iterations of Keldon here. We've seen him be a 20-plus point a game scorer. We've seen him be the 8th man off the bench. You wonder what iteration of Keldon Johnson becomes at that point. Should it have gone that direction? I think probably more realistically, they go that draft route, and maybe down the road, they probably play their way out, in my opinion, of getting a Sohan at 8, somewhere around there, getting a top 10 pick, because I think they'd be right around the back. And, I think they'd be just outside the play-in, realistically, somewhere between 6 and 10, maybe 6 and 9. I think that's probably where they would be 2 years into that point. But yeah, you're hoping at that point that you're putting something together that can complement Sengun and Haliburton. And I think you can find that help to do it. You have to be creative a little bit, because there are plenty of 3-and-D wings, but there's a difference between having them and having good ones. But the assets still would have been there. They have all their picks.
Yeah, exactly.
It still would have been there.
We're not done talking about this topic. When we get back, we're going to continue entering the multiverse and ask, if the Spurs had selected Haliburton, what would that mean now? We'll also look at the league. Yes, league-wide ramifications if that happened with Casey Vieira. Make sure to follow him on X at Casey_Vieira. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough, and that is men's mental health. There's this pressure to always keep it together, right? To perform, provide, to never show any weaknesses. But the truth is, real strength comes from opening up and taking care of your mental well-being. Every year, 6 million men in the U.S. experience depression, and many go undiagnosed. But talking to someone, a friend, a loved one, a therapist, can make a huge difference. That's where BetterHelp comes in. Therapy isn't just time for crisis. It's also time when the good things are going. When you keep those good times going. What about how to set boundaries? What about coping tools? What about just finding the best version of yourself? With over 35,000 licensed professionals, BetterHelp makes it easy to find a therapist who understands you. You can connect from anywhere, switch therapists at any time, and it fits sessions into your schedule with just a click. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Look, talk it out with BetterHelp. Listeners right now can get themselves 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And we're back right here on Locked On Spurs, joined by Casey Vieira. Make sure to follow him on X at Casey_Vieira. Do that right now. He and we're in the multiverse, just like you are right now. We're peeking into that other universe where the Spurs selected Tyrese Haliburton instead of Devin Vassell. So we talked about some of the overlook. That's the big picture things. Obviously they're likely to be a Wemby, Murray, or White still gets moved. The Spurs are still not there yet to being a title contender. But in my opinion, Casey, I mentioned, I think they're just a middling team. Again, they still needed to make moves. But here's the thing, too. I was going to ask you this before the break. Does Haliburton become even a better player under Popovich? We saw what he did for Tony Parker. We saw what he did for Dejounte Murray. Does a young Tyrese Haliburton just explode on the scene under Popovich's tutelage?
I think so. I think he does, because you're looking at what he's under right now in good coaching with Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle is about as good as you're going to get in this league. You put him with Coach Pop in this Spurs system, might be a slightly different player, but a lot of the foundational things that make Haliburton's game special are conducive to what the Spurs do, what they
I should think he even becomes a better defender.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Because as good as Carlisle is, he hasn't necessarily always been known as the classic defensive-minded head coach. But I think Haliburton becomes a better defender. I mean, you look at his build, that wiry 6'5" build, has tools to, improve on that side of the floor. And I think his unselfishness fits right in with what the Spurs are looking for. So yeah, I do think he becomes the player that he has now if he arrived in San Antonio. Again, like you said, maybe even better, because he could have improved on the defensive end.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the other thing too. I think with Haliburton as a Spur, I think the Spurs are not in a play-in playoff drought. I think they're not in the sixth season. I think they were 6-7 seasons away from a play-in or playoff berth. Maybe they crack one. I think they get into one play-in, and I think they actually get into the playoffs via the play-in. What do you think about that? I think that's stretching it too much.
You look at what the Houston Rockets are doing right now with Sengun as their all-star focal point. Yeah. Why can't that be the Spurs in this multiverse? Because after Sengun, Haliburton is better than, he might even be better than Sengun Haliburton is than anyone on that Rockets roster. So I'm right there with you. I don't think they're title contenders. I don't think they're Oklahoma City. I don't think they're Denver. I don't think they're Minnesota. But I think if that was the team they had in 2025, I think that would be a team that would find themselves to have snapped that playoff drought.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And let's see. I think that season, I got here, 2021 season, they were 33 and 39?
Yes,
they were. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does Haliburton get you 40? Does he get you 40 wins? That's 7 more wins. Yeah.
It's tough because that season was still in the COVID world. And that Spurs season went off the rails because they had a stretch of games that got canceled in the middle because of COVID. And Derrick White, who was, considered an integral part of that team. I don't want to say it had the equivalent of a season-ending injury, but was hurt and then missed a good chunk of season due to COVID, and didn't come back as the player that he was even half of that. He was after he came back, he did not have a good season. He struggled immensely with the basketball, got benched one day. I remember. So no, I don't think they're that much better. I think they're in the play-in conversation because 40, and they hit 40, remember that's a 72 game season. So that means they're 8 games over 500. I don't think they get to 8 games over 500 if a lot of things play out similar in that COVID world that it did. I don't think in that 2021 campaign they are exponentially better just based off the extenuating circumstances that surrounded the team. Maybe the following year, it's tough to say because the following year is when they started to divert towards the rebuild a little bit. Around Dejounte's breakout year, and they made the play. And again, I think they are improved after that. And then certainly 2 years after that, if they do have Haliburton at that point. But of course, that means you don't get Wemby at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, one other thing too is I wonder in this universe, because the Spurs, they say they're a middling team, they make the play in, they get bounced, or somehow they get into the playoffs, they get bounced. In this world, does Haliburton become the next Kawhi? Does he become, what, this ain't working out, get me out of here, I want to go to a title contending team? Do we have that scenario again in this multiverse?
I don't think so. Not yet.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. No, I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
He definitely fits into the Spurs culture. There's no doubt about that. He's never been on the headlines for the wrong reasons, at least to my knowledge. So he fits in well. I think Popovich really boosts his game. I think what we're seeing now in reality, we might see that maybe times 2 under Popovich. Because look what he did for DeRozan. I mean, DeRozan could say, I never evolved my game until I came to San Antonio to Pop. You saw a better commitment to defense. You saw him become a better facilitator. And I think the same thing happens for Haliburton. But no, I think even if you have Haliburton, you're still looking for his running mate. I think you're still, maybe Sengun turns into that. Do you think Sengun becomes the 1-2 punch in San Antonio?
He was an all-star this year.
Yeah.
He did it with better. He did it with less point guard play.
Yeah.
Than what you would get with Haliburton.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. Yeah,
there's one thing. Primo definitely doesn't go top 15. That doesn't happen.
No,
yeah.
No,
I don't know. I think
that's never a thing.
Yeah, that's never
a thing.
Never becomes a thing, and so much more. Okay, so we kind of looked at this universe and said, okay, this is what the implication for San Antonio. Yes, Haliburton would have been a phenomenal pick. He would have probably been helping the Spurs right now, becoming out of the rebuild sooner. But what about league-wide ramifications? Casey, how does this ripple effect infect the entire NBA?
See, I have my notes here.
Okay.
Because when I initially pitched this segment to do, I had more of the Spurs focus. Yeah. But I had some time last night, and so I kind of got to scribbling a little bit. And I realized that had the Spurs, and not to point fingers directly at the Spurs, could be Detroit, who passed up on him in favor of Killian Hayes.
Oof. Brutal.
Could have been
brutal.
It could have been the Knicks, who passed up on him. Obi Toppin, which ironically enough is now.
And if I remember correctly, I think Knick fan base were up in arms about them passing on Haliburton, right?
They were.
Yeah, I remember that. Yes, I was still living in New York. Yeah, at the time, I remember that.
The Bulls passed on him at 4 for Patrick Williams. So the Spurs aren't the lone culprit in all this. But what I discovered is that the fact that because all those teams, and well, I guess beyond, the prior 11 teams that did not take Tyrese Haliburton for which reason, some understandable, because they let him fall into the hands of the Sacramento Kings. They pretty much changed the trajectory of the league for the next decade.
Wow. Let's see what you got.
And I'm going to explain.
Okay.
So we'll start on the Kings side of things. Mm-hmm. So that year, they're nothing special. They go 30-52. De'Aaron Fox has a pretty good year, 25-7. But still, at the end of one season of play, that's when the chatters come out at the end of the 2020-21 season. That's when the chatters start to come out of whether the duo of Haliburton and Fox can play together. Mm-hmm. So you go into 21-22. Julius Randle is having a really good season, coming off a really good season for the Knicks. 2021 gets them back into the playoffs. There's a little bit of regression. Fox is starting to have a little bit, not a regression, but a little bit of a fall off trying to mesh with Haliburton. So 2 options come about here. Are they going to move Fox potentially for Julius Randle, which was a conversation, or are they going to move Haliburton to the Pacers for Domantas Sabonis?
Right.
Which is ultimately how real life played out.
Played out, yeah.
But say they move Fox to the Knicks for Julius Randle, and they elect to go with the core of Haliburton, Randle, Fox goes to the Knicks. That means the Knicks don't get Karl Anthony Towns because Randle was the focal point of that trade, which this was thought to be a possibility because that's why they drafted Obi Toppin to begin with before his breakout season, Julius Randle. They don't end up with Cat, and in all likelihood, they don't end up with Jalen Brunson because the point guard spot is filled.
Right.
Jalen Brunson, you wonder, is probably now more inclined to stay in Dallas because nobody else offered him that $55 million contract. So Dallas has their foundation of Brunson, Luka, and perhaps Porzingis. Do with that what you will. Do with that what you will. I'm not done. I'm not done, Jeff. I'm not done.
All right, what you got?
So then on the Pacers side of things, they pass on the opportunity to get Haliburton, whether they or that the Kings
the trade,
the trade. So Haliburton's not sent to the Pacers. So their foundation is, of course, Sabonis, Victor Oladipo, who came over in the Paul George trade from Oklahoma City, and Malcolm Brogdon, who was coming off 3 years in Milwaukee, won Rookie of the Year, and was really viewed as a centerpiece of their future going forward.
Sure.
It didn't particularly work out that way.
Nope.
So they trade Brogdon to the Boston Celtics, the Pacers do. Who do the Celtics give up in that deal to go back to the Pacers?
Don't say it.
Aaron Nesmith.
Oh, they're going to say one of the Tatum or Brown or something like that.
No. Aaron Nesmith goes back to the Pacers.
Yeah.
So Brogdon goes to Boston. Brogdon is the 6th man of the year for the Boston Celtics. That summer is the summer of the Damian Lillard trade to the Bucks, which of course sends Jrue Holiday to the Portland Trailblazers.
Right.
Something the Bucks did not see coming was that the Trailblazers were ready to move off of Holiday. So who do they send Holiday for? They send Holiday to the Celtics for Malcolm Brogdon. And as a result, you're looking at the Celtics winning a championship a few years later with Jrue Holiday as a big part of their core.
Wow.
Going back to the original sentiment that had Haliburton not been traded to the Pacers, none of this would happen.
Yeah.
None of this would happen.
It's
at all.
Amazing.
Right?
Amazing. Yeah.
And then there's, I guess, smaller, scrims, the way you look at it here, Pistons, if the Pistons had taken him, they don't have Cade Cunningham right now.
No, they don't.
And Cade Cunningham is who even knows at that point. So, lesson learned here, the Spurs, by not selecting Tyrese Haliburton, letting him fall into the hands of the Sacramento Kings, completely changed the landscape of the NBA for the next decade.
It definitely did. Here's the other thing too. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, just and I know there's some what ifs in there. There's quite a few.
Sure.
But in my mind, not completely foreign what ifs if you look about what was talked about at the time.
Well, I got two for you. I got you. By the way, great breakdown. That's just phenomenal. I'm glad
I had some time last night.
Yeah, I'm glad you pitched this idea to me. But I got two things. I guess one is kind of a question. One, I think if the Spurs do select Haliburton, Brian Wright, perhaps serious contention for exec of the year. I think he doesn't get as much.
They got to win.
Yeah.
They got to win. But
I think he gets up there. I think he doesn't get as much fan backlash as he's getting right now. And so I think that happens. But here's another bigger question. Which team does Wemby go to? Because the Spurs definitely don't get him in this scenario. They don't get him.
No.
So where does he go to?
Are we looking at a LaMelo Ball, Victor Wembanyama?
Charlotte. Wemby could be a Hornet.
10 years.
And that's not a bad 1-2 combo there.
Are you looking at that? Are you looking at him? Houston doesn't have Sengun at that point, and they were still, even with Sengun, they were bad. So even worse, are you looking at Wemby in Houston?
Yeah. The place he did not want to go to.
The place he did not want to go to?
Oh, man. So much what ifs. See, thank you, Casey, for bringing up this topic, man. It's just awesome.
One decision. Well, actually not one, really, because Haliburton went 12.
Right.
So 11 decisions to put Tyrese Haliburton in the hands of the Sacramento Kings changed a decade's worth of basketball and an era worth of basketball.
I know. And here's a guy
There
who,
you go.
by his peers, was considered overrated.
Which is wild.
Wild. And he's in the NBA finals right now. Well, starting tomorrow against OKC. But yeah, I mean, look, I look back and I'm like, man, Spurs. Haliburton could have been a Spur, but it gets hindsight's 2020. Now look at them now. Technically, they are perhaps in a better place for the long term versus Indiana. You know, the Wemby's on board. You know, Castle looking good, so it all works out. But man, just how little. What is it? The butterfly effect.
I was just gonna say, have you ever had such a butterfly effect episode of Locked On here?
This just blew my mind, especially when we went down the NBA landscape. That was like, what? Can you imagine Dallas? Dallas might be challenging OKC or might be up there with Brunson, Luka, and Porzingis.
I mean, if Porzingis stays reasonably healthy, even if they just the core is just Brunson and Doncic, there's always been the overriding sentiment that or maybe not overriding, but there's always been the sentiment that Brunson doesn't become Brunson. He wasn't in Luka's shadow. I'm not one of those people. No, I think Brunson's too tremendous at what he does to have not broken out. But there was talk with Brunson that when he signed that $100 million deal in the summer of 22 to 23, he was the only one. The Knicks were the only one to offer that. Yeah, and he was interested in going back to Dallas, but Mark Cuban wasn't willing to go anywhere remotely close. They were willing to offer that 55 and go from there. Yeah, and as a result, Brunson in New York doing what he's doing.
Yeah, that being too.
The Mavericks are what they are right now. They probably don't have Cooper Flagg and Anthony Davis.
You can go on and on and on and on and on with this one little move that the Spurs did not make, and that is not selecting Tyrese Haliburton. All right, we're not done talking about the multiverse. When we get back, I got a friend of the show, Rudy Campos. He so wanted to join the show because he loves these what ifs, but he sent me his thoughts on what could have happened if the Spurs had selected Haliburton. We also got a shout out and so much more coming up next right here on Locked On Spurs. Hey, I want to talk to you about Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the person didn't answer, what did you do? Probably nothing. You moved on. Well, that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Look, they got an AI agent that'll handle calls after hours, answer common questions, capture leads so you never miss a customer. They got a shared inbox, which is pretty much a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and text from a single app. Open Phone is offering listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing number with any other service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And we're back right here on Locked On Spurs, joined by Casey Vieira. I think he has America Chavez's powers. She can open up multiverses because he just did that. And he's continued to do that right here on Locked On Spurs. We are entering the multiverse and asking, what if the Spurs had selected Haliburton over Vassell? Now, the first segment, we talk about the Spurs ramifications. Second segment, we talk about the league ramifications, a little bit more of the Spurs ramifications. But what does somebody else think about this topic here? Now, a good friend of the show, Rudy Campos of Sweep the Lead. He's so wanting to do this. Again, if you ever go to watch his show, he loves doing what ifs. From what if the Pistons don't do the Malice in the Palace? What if, Jordan doesn't slip past number one? So much more. So this is definitely in his wheelhouse. So I'm going to get your reaction to his take here, Casey. Here he goes. He says, quote, if the Spurs drafted Haliburton, they would not have been in a position to get Wemby. I think that's obvious. Right. They would be in a mediocre category, not bad enough to be a bottom team, but not good enough to be a contender. DeRozan would have more than likely stayed in San Antonio, forming a backcourt of Dejounte, DeRozan and Haliburton. Jakob would have been the perfect fit for all three of them. Overall, with Haliburton, the Spurs are a play-in, playoff team as constructed at the time, but never a title contender. End quote. What do you think about that?
I don't think DeMar was going to stay.
Really?
I don't think DeMar was going to stay. I think DeMar was ready to move on to something else at that point. That's me personally. I think DeMar was good here. Maybe the Haliburton thing changes that. Having a point guard of that ilk, maybe it does, because the ball still is in his court at that DeMar's point, DeMar's court at that point, and he's seeing Vassell that he knows. He sees them select Vassell, and he knows for a fact that he's not coming back. Yeah, that almost goes without saying. So perhaps that does it to get him on out of here. So I don't know long term past that 21 season if DeMar stays. I don't think he would, because I think that he was still of the mindset he's heading towards the home stretch of his career, is going to make an attempt to pursue a title, and he's not going to do it in those first few years in San Antonio. He ends up signing with the Bulls. That first year they're pretty good. Doesn't work out the rest of the way. That summer the Bulls, they had Lonzo, and then they had Zach LaVine, and it's a pretty good core that has them in the top half of the Eastern Conference for most of the season. And it ultimately doesn't work out, and they get bumped. If I'm not mistaken, they get bumped out in the first round too. I don't think DeMar stays. The Jakob Poeltl thing,
that was interesting. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the Jakob Poeltl thing was interesting because we talked about the Sengun, and I had I wrote Sengun question mark Jakob question mark, and we didn't get to the Jakob question mark part. He was starting to come into his zone those last few years, and that's why they were able to get a pretty good pick for him last year from Toronto. Yeah. That's a question that if they, going back to the Sengun side of things, what stock do they put in Jakob at that point? Is this kind of looked at as Sengun's the predecessor, and we're not ready or willing to pay the extension that Jakob is going to get, the money that he deservedly is going to get? We'd rather pivot to the Sengun part. I think that'd be valid, because that's actually what ended up happening in real life. They cashed in and they got pretty good capital on it. They got a pretty good return out of it. I tend to think that direction. Of course, if that's assumed that they were to go Sengun at 12 or in that realistic ballpark, I do think had he stayed, he would have fit pretty well. Because he turned in, by the time he left, he was a real good pick and pop guy, and even was kind of extending his range a little bit. I mean, it used to be outside of 6 feet. Once you got him outside of 6 feet, it was a black hole. Nothing was happening. But by the time he left, he was mobile. He was extending that range. Not a 3-point shooter by any stretch, but he had gotten immensely better from when he first got here in 2019. I agree with that point. In the immediacy, what they are is right around probably that 6 to 10, like we were saying. But if we're looking at it right now, the Spurs of present day, they haven't been close to the playoffs.
No, they haven't.
So we'll call it what in the immediacy, the Spurs in the different universe, they're probably more successful. Does it turn them into a title contender? I don't know.
No.
The long-term future is much brighter with Victor. But in the present day, there hasn't been a massive sample size that shows that they're better than the different universe.
Right. What year was Primo selected?
21.
It was the next season, right?
21. Yeah.
Okay. Here, this definitely, we'll save this. Maybe I might save this one for Rudy, because he loves these what ifs. But what if the Spurs didn't pick Primo and got Sengun? Because he was still on the board. Sengun was on the board still.
And operating under the assumption they still went Vassell the year before.
Yeah. Here, that's a good one.
No Victor, at minimum.
Again, no Victor. Again, yeah, probably not.
Do they keep Dejounte? because you're looking at
Man,
the job.
yeah.
If they had
Man, that's a
stayed
good
the
one.
course.
Oh man, because
But
Dejounte Sengun will be dynamite. I think they would work a lot better.
You think they would have stuck with the Dejounte Derrick White thing?
No. I think maybe they still trade Derrick, but I think Dejounte, it becomes a better piece to run alongside Sengun. I don't know. With the Haliburton, I see that's the thing.
I
Haliburton.
mean, I like
Yeah.
Haliburton, Jakob Poeltl,
Yeah.
and I do Dejounte Sengun.
Man, okay, you know what? I'm diving into the freaking rabbit hole, Casey. I gotta save this one for a new episode of Locked On Spurs coming. That's a good one too.
This was
fun.
only about
Yeah,
45
notes and
minutes to an
everything.
hour's worth of prep. If you gave me a whole day to waste to write all that down,
Yeah,
this show would not be no 35, 40.
we'll have to
minutes,
break it in
whatever
like
is.
part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yeah.
It'll be in parts.
Yeah, this would turn into a docu-series, man.
Be what? All right. Let's go see what Locked On Spurs fans are talking about. We got to put up we won't have time for one comment. This multiverse thing really got to us here. Here we go. Let me pick one out here. See, I wasn't even ready for it. I'm like, yes. Like, right when I brought up Primo and passing on Primo for Sengun, I'm like, well, who would work better? You know, if I'm just focusing on Dejounte or Derrick, because I still think one of those guys gets moved. But
I
okay,
agree.
stop. I gotta stop. Okay. Here's one. This is from Anthony Ramos 361. He says, damn, I would love to package something for OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson. Problem solved and still draft Dylan Harper. So I guess problem solved meaning a wing player type guy there, or even a big with Mitchell Robinson. What do you think about that? You think OG and Mitchell Robinson, since you and I, well, you're a native New Yorker, I'm an adopted New Yorker. Do you think a deal for one of those guys helps the Spurs in this rebuild?
In the Haliburton universe?
No.
In the normal universe.
Yeah, we've exited the multiverse now.
We're back in real time.
We're back in real time. Okay, yes.
What do they give?
I don't know.
You saw Mitchell Robinson in that playoff. I mean, OG was solid as well.
Solid.
You got to give to get. You're not going to get either of those guys for cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And what do the Spurs? What do the Spurs say? The Knicks want to stay in title contention, which they do. They're close. Mm-hmm. What do the Spurs offer that's going to keep them in title contention?
Woof! Keep them in title contention.
Draft capital that they can turn for somebody else, in my opinion.
That's about it. Because I don't think Keldon pushes them. I don't think
not moving Castle.
You're not moving Castle. Maybe Vassell. Maybe
they don't want Vassell.
No, they don't want Vassell. Yeah,
unless the only way I would see that working before you have to try to make the money work is that you would probably have to send them two. Mm-hmm. I think that's the only way. You would have to send them two so they could send two out to go get Giannis.
Yeah.
Or Durant, whatever it is. That's the only way I would see it working. And
all right.
I don't think it would. Yeah.
I'm right there. All right. Thank you for that comment there. We appreciate it. Keep them coming. You want to go to Locked On Spurs YouTube page and leave a comment because we definitely need your help in this long off season. Hey, before we go though, Casey, we got to go do a quick shout out. Friend of the show, Jacob Eric. He's on X at Jacob Eric C. I think Casey, you actually did a spot like this when he and his son did a box break of Wemby's rookie year in his cars.
Oh,
Yeah. It's them two. So
okay. We follow each other on Twitter. Jacob Eric.
Yeah. So his son David, who got that card during that infamous Locked On Spurs video, he is graduated from high school today. So congratulations to David. Just seems like yesterday. See, this is what your dad wants me to say. Seems just like yesterday you almost messed up the episode of Locked On Spurs, and he's talking about you literally.
Which one's Jacob? Wait, which one's Jacob? Which one's Eric?
Oh no, it's the same guy. Jacob Eric is the name of the father. His son is David.
Oh,
so, okay.
I
So
thought it was
David.
God.
No. So David is graduating from high school. But again, if you want to, I mean, if you can dig through the archives of Locked On Spurs, go revisit that episode where father and son. I mean, first of all, kudos to them because they bought these cards are not cheap. They bought a brand new box of cards and were willing to open it live recording, and to see in the hopes of getting a Wemby rookie card. And literally, and Casey did a story about this. Last pack, the last card, they had it there, and the son David.
I didn't realize that was the last pack.
It was the last pack and the last card, and
so they're on the bottom of the 9th inning. There.
Yes. Well, it gets even better. David actually just shuffled through and didn't completely inspect them, and he threw the pack on the table in the video. And the father, Jacob Eric, looked at that pack because I guess when it fell, it kind of separated the cards out, and it was tucked away at the last one. I guess they got stuck or something, tucked away. And if you look at the video, he's staring at the coffee table, going like, "Oh my God, there it is!" And then they just leapt up in the air. But yeah, David almost
lucky he threw it. He didn't dent it, man. You go through all that, and then you throw the card and you dent it, you pop the corner on it.
Yeah. So he didn't do that
type thing, man.
Yeah, he just casually tossed it like this, nothing with force, just kind of like bust, and then there it was sitting there. But again, congratulations, David, graduated from high school. I think today. This episode's coming out today, so he's come out today. Way to go, David! Way to go! Congratulations! Yes, big achievement here. All right, we are done talking. We got to hear from you. What about this what if world, this universe that we just entered and exited out of? Just how much would have things changed, not just for the Spurs, but for the league, if the Spurs had selected Haliburton? Leave us your thoughts right now. Go to the Locked On Spurs YouTube page. Leave us a comment. We're reading a future episode of Locked On Spurs. If you want to talk about Casey and his tons of notes there he's been showing off, let him know what you think on at Casey_Vieira. Do that right now. Casey, awesome topic. Glad you brought it up. I think this is an awesome thing to talk about, especially with the final starting tomorrow. So it's perfect.
Right. I figured it was very timely.
Yeah, very timely.
And us this time of year, as we always like to say, going back to the COVID days, we're in the Derrick White lunchbox. No, not Derrick.
I remember. It was Bryn Forbes.
Bryn Forbes. So,
by the way, he's playing in South America now.
Bryn Forbes?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Keep the dream alive, I guess.
He's still plugging away. I believe he's like oh my God, he's just in South America. I don't remember, but that team put out a picture of him with the jersey. I was like, oh, that's what he's doing nowadays. But yeah, there he is. Yeah,
I got not much to add.
Hey, let's not enter that universe. How about that?
Yeah, that's not a universe I want to get into.
All right, Casey, again, thank you. We appreciate your time coming here, Locked On Spurs, and sharing this topic with everybody. I think a lot of fans are going to enjoy this episode a lot, so we appreciate it. Casey, everybody else, we appreciate y'all for making Locked On Spurs your first and only spot for all things silver and black. Find us on iTunes, Spotify, Kens 5 Plus app, YouTube. Subscribe right now. I do that ASAP. We'll definitely have a new episode of Locked On Spurs tomorrow as the Spurs offseason continues. Maybe we'll resume the player profiles. Or unless Rudy's beating on my door right now saying, I want to do a what if. I got to have a what if, because he loves the what if episodes. Hey, before we go, you make sure your second listen is Locked On NBA Big Board. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So for Casey Vieira, the multiverse master, I should say, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put a lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.